Welcome on the Dharma journey, Eddie, a very special guest.
All right, thank you for having me. Thank you for having me on your podcast. I'm honored to be here.
Oh, I feel so blessed. Actually, Eddie is in our living room right now, so we had a bit of we had a bit of technical issues at his place. So he came over to my place. So I'm recording in my office, and he's recording in the living room. So let's hope
it's
that it goes well.
it's the natural soundtrack of Bali. It's either peaceful birds or construction. So you
Yeah,
get one or the other.
one or the other. I know. Today we're hoping. Well, we'll see. We'll go with the flow. You know, it's all part of the life, the chaos. So yeah, today we're going to be speaking all about the impact of trauma on the nervous system, and how we are living in this like chronic state of fight or flight. And we were just speaking about it before, about how we are in the sympathetic nervous system a lot of the time, and we can't seem to get into that rest and digest state of the parasympathetic nervous system. Eddie is a polyvagal informed, trauma informed body worker. He has over 5,000 hours of bodywork experience. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, that on body experience. So
On
working on people.
Yeah, amazing. And
Yeah.
Eddie is teaching bodywork and neurotrauma for therapists, professionals, all in their field, all over the world under his brand, The Science of Touch. I
That
think
was such a lovely introduction. Thank you.
I've been practicing it. I'm like at the beginning of the podcast, I'm like, okay, how can I be a little bit more smooth in my transition? So when I, introduce people, so that's my homework before my podcast. So yeah, so today we're going to be talking about the mind-body connection, and yeah, how like living in a chronic state of stress really impacts our nervous system. And that's something that you obviously work, with. And yeah, I'd love to know, like, how did you get into bodywork? And maybe you can explain what is bodywork for those people who have no clue what it is, maybe.
Sure, yeah. Well, I am a manual therapist, so I use my hands to bring people back into a state of nervous system regulation, and that's essentially what bodywork is taking somebody through a body process that they can't achieve on their own. I definitely got into this through the physiotherapy field, which I was a part of for the better part of a decade. I was working on anyone from athletes with sudden impact injuries to um, to elderly and old people, and working with their chronic injury history. And I noticed how hands-on therapy itself was just as valuable a tool as exercise and sports science. So I moved into the therapeutic bodywork realm. I was hooked immediately, and then I discovered this entire world of trauma-informed and neurotrauma studies. And so I said, hey, these two belong together. And I made an impactful business around it, a heart-centered business, and that's where I'm at today.
Yeah, that's my kind of hope for the Dharma journey, is like bringing people like you that are specialists in their field, and really showing people all over the world that there's so many different healing modalities, and what works for you may not work for me, and we all have a specific healing modality that's going to be the most impactful for us. And maybe we have to try a couple of different ones. And I think a lot of people that are living in Bali, they come to Bali, they don't really know why, but it's definitely a healing place to
Sure.
really like undo all the stuff that's keeping us operating from that stressed out state. Burnout. A
Sure.
lot of people listening are probably in a little bit of stress right now with COVID, and having unfortunate external stresses that are everyday things that are in our life, kids, work, bosses, and yeah, for the people listening, maybe you can share a little bit about the different types of trauma, because obviously we have big trauma, and we kind of know what those are, car crashes or physical abuse, etc. But what about the other forms of trauma that maybe people wouldn't even think we're trauma, but they actually are traumatic events that happen to us and that affect us over the course of our life.
Yeah, there's so many ways to get to the same path, right? And so no matter what trauma is defined as, is big T trauma, little t being like, say your morning commute into work is an hour drive, and it's a very stressful hour. And so you're doing that every day, compounding. And say you're drinking a large coffee on the way into work. What does that compound into eventually onto your nervous system? Big T trauma is usually defined as like a massive, overwhelming event that we have to rebound or recover from, which we naturally do because the body is such a wise, intelligent, protective mechanism of the mind. But it all funnels. It eventually, like we've tried to nuance down trauma and define it, but it all funnels into neurotrauma and the nervous system. And eventually, and it's just how do our coping mechanisms on multiple layers adjust to our state or our state change. So trauma is putting your body into any sort of a state change, and we need to just honor that and recognize that on like the different levels that it happens at. Rather than necessarily like defining it to, oh, this was a psychological event, etc. If you follow some of the people like Stephen Porges or Peter Levine, they'll tell you that it's not the event that is traumatic, it's the trauma process, or it's the processing of trauma that is the traumatic stressor or the repeat event. So it's like, how do we deal with the aftermath on multiple layers? And we do that through the body. So body processes like massage, like yoga, etc., or modalities that you were speaking about. So.
Yeah, like I find that super interesting because, for example, I see when my dog gets into a fight or something like that, and after the fight they shake it off, or they within seconds they back to normal. They're happy, feel carefree. However, humans, I mean, even if we've had, like, for example, I know in my life when I was growing up, I was in a household, I wouldn't say it's super traumatic, but I mean, we had for sure little things happen to us that, definitely would have affected us and dysregulate our nervous system. I think we'll go back into that about, co-regulating with our parents as children. We can't, I think if I'm right, co-regulate by ourselves. So we need our parents to help us co-regulate until we can do it ourselves. And,
Totally.
as kids, maybe, we're a bit more like dogs, I guess. we can shake it off and we can scream and people don't think we're crazy. But I know, for example, my life, when I was growing up, we definitely were living in a state of fight or flight in terms of stress around money. We had, my mom unfortunately didn't have the best choice in men. We had quite abusive men physically, weren't very nice towards us. And I think that definitely now looking back has affected myself in terms of the way I relate to men and also to my own nervous system, even in my relationship with my partner. Like, if we've had chaos as children, and that is normal to us, then when we are in an environment that's actually calming and normal, it actually feels weird. And I know this in my life. It's like we want to cause the chaos because we're so used to that dysregulation. Do you find that with a lot of your clients that have had maybe a traumatic experience as a child, or they've had a chaotic kind of family environment?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, trauma is like it's a disruption of orientation to time and space and emotion, and so if we don't understand so we have the body and we have the mind, and in the middle we have emotions, and if we don't understand how that is being navigated because of something that is completely subconscious, like beyond our capacity of control. We find ourselves either moving really fast and that's normal, moving in a specific behavior pattern that's normal and quote unquote safe to us, even though it can be devastating. Or we can, be the opposite end of the spectrum, because trauma exists on a spectrum. The autonomic nervous system exists on a spectrum. It's not black or white. So we are on various lengths of dysregulation based on our needs getting met. And so, the opposite end of the spectrum would be just complete apathy, laziness, non-inspiration. And then the other end would be, hyper-regulation, hyper-vigilance. I got to do this, I got to do that, or I don't feel normal. So if we bring somebody back into a slowed down, if we teach them like how to slow and orient to time and space, that's the therapeutic process to work with trauma. And you can see that when people catch on, it can be revolutionary to the treatment of trauma is to take them out of that, robbery of time and space, essentially. So,
yeah, we've been talking a lot of that in our house at the moment, because I think you can relate, because you and your partner Kelly have also reduce your coffee amount, and that's something we've been looking into, my partner and I, George. It's like we were in COVID time, we noticed a pattern in our relationship where we were arguing more. And it was because we were both having coffee every day, and we were very stimulated. And obviously we live in Bali, a bit of Ayurveda. It's like when we're more of like a pitta type person, we have more of that fiery nature. So we naturally are drawn towards things that keep us kind of exerting more energy, like coffee, exercise, over-exercising, working late. And we noticed that now we're not drinking as much coffee, and our nervous system's more, rest and digest, and more calming. We're actually having less, reactive moments of when we react out of like impulse, and, when you're just busy and doing things and someone said something, it triggers you, and then you're like reactive instead of coming from that presence and that awareness. Do you notice that a lot with people that have experienced trauma? It's hard for them to settle into a calming state, like for example doing something like meditation or things that are going to calm them. They find that resistance towards going there.
It has everything to do with the limbic system and our regulation of emotion and memory. And I'll use the coffee as an example. When I stopped or slowed down drinking coffee, you also said this, like you noticed that your levels of reaction have changed, and you're able to address emotion in a different way, maybe. So it's so the amygdala regulates fear, the hippocampus regulates memory, the thalamus and hypothalamus regulate the autonomic nervous system and the signals from the body. And so all three of those, plus a few other bodies, are popping off all at the same time to try and tell you who you are. And so when we engage in behavior that is self-soothing to us, maybe necessarily, like I want 3 cups of coffee so that I can get through the day, that becomes kind of like an override to all that system. And so, with trauma, you typically see people not able to get in touch with their limbic system, not working with implicit memories that well. I still drink my cup of coffee every morning, even though I know it's bad for me or something like that. You know what I mean? So it's like, how do we work with our reactions? Maybe our fears, like our amygdalic responses. How do we work with our history and our memory? And then how do we feel or feel what our body's doing? And that's essentially, it has everything. So it has everything to do with your limbic system. When you're, when you're dysregulated, you're not able to get in touch with that.
Yeah, I find that super interesting, because when I first started doing yoga, I found it so hard to meditate. Like I could not meditate. It was like, and it's so funny because I hear so many of my clients, and I'm sure Kelly as well, Eddie's girlfriend is a yoga teacher, a really good friend of mine. And we love traditional hatha yoga because it kind of really slows our mind down and it helps us be the observer of these thoughts. And it's like, it's not that we're not having these thoughts, it's that we can start to use, pranayama breath to slow the mind down so we can really see what thoughts are coming up. And I think for a lot of people that have experienced trauma, I know for me, I don't know if any of you listening that have maybe experienced some form of trauma, whatever it may be, you have a memory loss almost. Like we go into these states of stress, and it's the best way for us to completely disassociate is to block out the memory. And I know for me, like I've had times in my life where I can't remember being a child. Like there's so many memories that I just don't recollect. Is that something you see a lot? It's like people, these memories start to come back as their nervous system becomes more regulated.
Yeah, there's we're constantly observing our reality. We're constantly shaping our reality through our sensory information. And so that, divides into the known and the unknown. And like with that comes protective mechanisms. When we go into the world of the unknown, we go right into our protective mechanisms that just bring us back to the known. And it becomes, a daily work to try and feel comfortable with the unknown. And so when we default to our protective mechanisms, you find two forms of dissociation. You find psychoform dissociation, which is I just block it out, or I go to something else, or I avoid the trigger altogether. And then you also have somatoform dissociation, which can be like anything from body pain, chronic pain, to heart fluttering or something known as dysautonomia. So so we have these two just like constant protective mechanisms. So that's like what happens when trauma is chronic, or when our trauma response is chronic. It can show up in those dissociation patterns, either mentally or physically.
Yeah, I would love to maybe talk a little bit more about that, because I think so many of us, I know a lot of my clients, they experience some form of chronic pain in terms of back pain, neck pain. Could you maybe speak about the metaphysical reasons for back pain and what that can relate to in terms of emotions, so people can maybe see certain patterns in maybe where they're experiencing an emotional response and that's showing up as a physical pain? Yeah.
Sure. How deep do you want me to dive into that one?
Go deep. I mean, just like, normal, I guess most pain is, I feel like pain is our teacher, isn't it? So is there just a few examples where you notice that the pain is not just from the gym, not just from sitting in a chair all day, it's something a lot more deeper than that? Like,
yeah, well, all pain eventually is psychosomatic. It lands in certain parts of the brain that tell you your sense of self and sense of being, and that's the insula. And so however your muscles and your nerves are operating at any given time informs like this sense of self. Or if something informs your sense of self and your sense of like your definition of self, that can be directed down to the body. And so you have this like, if you have this just intricate working of sense of self and sense of body and then sense of purpose, and they're just like, they're going up and down like a ladder at all times. And disruption in that process can be in the form of chronic pain. And if you look at chronic pain in particular, if you look at the studies on chronic pain and depression, they're hand in hand. It's almost like 83 to 90% of chronic pain sufferers have suffered depression at some point in their life or something like that. So it's don't quote me on that, by the way, but it's right on up there. So it all really lands in our psychosomatic. And what I do is I work with body reflexes, and I work with if we were to talk about metaphysics, all nerves have a tone. And what I mean by that is like all my nerves shaping my body are always working, even when I'm sleeping. Otherwise, I'd be a puddle of mush. And so they all work and they all operate at a very specific tone or a frequency. And so I work with nerve reflexes and adding quality frequency back to those nerves so that we can get the body in an optimal tone again, where it may be shutting down from trauma or anything in response to the environment. And so we're working with nerve tone, which is a metaphysical property in and of itself, to make sure that the being, that the body, mind, and soul are connected.
I heard the dog bark. I was like, oh. Yeah, I think a lot of us are, I don't know, I know for me, for example, I speaking from my own experience, before coming to Bali and before like practicing yoga, I was in this high tone state. Like I was like, ah! And I'd still get there as well, especially if I had a coffee or something. But if I'm in a stressed out state, or if I feel like I've got too much stimulation, which I think a lot of people can relate, so much going on in their life, we're in this high tone, and that's like really affecting our immune system and really affecting our digestion, which is obviously in Ayurveda, it's like the root cause of a lot of disease is imbalance in the agni in the digestion. And obviously when we're in a stressed out state, our immune system's suppressed, so we can fight or flight kind of thing. What happens if your nervous system is in this sympathetic state for a long period of time? What can show up in the body in terms of either obviously chronic pain or nervous system disorders? Is there a specific health issue that you see over and over again that's starting to show up as chronic sympathetic nervous system state of being stressed out all the time? I'm not sure if that's the right word, but
no, you so what you're tapping on is something known as Cannon's blunder. And so we think of sympathetic and parasympathetic, but the sympathetic's always going. It's always going to go, like, no matter what. If we think about like the gas on a car or the gas pedal, that's always going to go. That's always going to keep us in an optimal state. It's always going to keep us motivated and driven to perform. And then we have the parasympathetic, which slows that process down so that we find a middle ground or a homeostasis. What we don't realize is that the parasympathetic systems are usually not as strong because they're a bit more ancient, but they're not as strong and as evolved as our sympathetic response. And so over time, over age, over stress, over trauma, this parasympathetic tone gets less and less and less. And so you're not meeting your sympathetic drive at the same level over time, right? And so what comes of that is, rather than this like high sympathetic overtone, it's this lack of parasympathetic strength. And what resting processes, what body processes do is they help to strengthen that parasympathetic back up. And so it's this spectrum of where is our parasympathetic not able to be strong enough, and then you see chronic. You see the dogs are so cute; they're barking right now. But you see, if you don't see that like matching up, then you see disease, then you see comorbidities, then you see dysregulating autonomic nervous systems, which can be anything from tummy problems, digestive issues, to heart fluttering, heart issues, to a inability to take deep diaphragmatic breaths or deep breaths, and then cardiopulmonary problems. But that is like that's down the road if we don't do anything about it. And quite often you see people want to do something about it. So they want to do what it takes to match these two sides up. Yeah. That was definitely the long description of it.
I love it. I love it. No, it's so good for people listening. It's like you get this scientific component, because I love Ayurveda, and I think it's one of the most ancient healing sciences in the world.
Absolutely.
Yet, when I'm explaining it to my clients and trying to make it, demystified for like the modern world, I find sometimes I don't know the words. I don't really have the scientific background that you obviously have. So I think it's really good for the people listening that are into like these healing modalities. And a lot of people I notice as well, though, they have got, for example, an underlying health issue, or like you said, your parasympathetic nervous system's not strengthened yet. And we really have to, like a muscle, we have to practice these rest and digest states. So like for me, I know it's so hard. It's like I just want to do, especially when we're on a mission and we want to grow, we want to have impact. We're constantly wanting to do more. And I say this as like we're human beings, not human doings. Yes. And often we forget that. And I know that we're luckily we're living in Bali, and we can go to the beach, we can do these, have a massage, we can do things quite often to bring us back into that parasympathetic nervous system. And I know for a lot of the people listening, in busy corporate jobs, lives, they don't really have those healing modalities, or they haven't been available to them. And that's what I love about, you guys, is like we can really bring a lot of healing modalities worldwide just from being online, and maybe not massage or body touch, but is there a specific healing modality that you practice in your life that really brings you back into that rest and digest, into that calming nervous system where you just feel like, everything melts away, any stress, and you just feel completely relaxed and have that deep sense?
Well, I'll tell you, my personal one is trying to wake up at the same time every day and go to sleep. Go to sleep when I can, but waking up at the same time every day has been absolutely revolutionary to my, calming process. I know that I'm going to get an adequate amount of sleep, which is absolutely the most important thing that we can be doing across the board, is getting our sleep right. That's, that was another benefit of coffee and getting rid of coffee is Kelly and I both got the sleep that we needed, and which we were pining for so like absolutely badly. We wanted our sleep back, so we got that. But just to touch on what you said about modalities and science, like spirit science is as scientific as science. And what's cool about us moving these modalities to the forefront is that, and something that Kelly and I are going to cover on our live tomorrow, is that like science and spirit science, they don't need to be so dogmatic. Like they can meet in the middle so that somebody can have this like brilliant reference point, this like internal orientation of safety, without having one side say, oh, you're not doing it right, or the other side say, oh, that science, what is that anyway? So we're finding these modalities that meet in the middle, like Ayurveda is such an important and wonderful tool, and bodywork is as ancient in its roots than it is in its scientific background. So like we're finding the merging of these modalities so that we can get them out into the public and not be so, not be such like finger waggers or like healers that say this is the only way,
My way is the highway. No,
my way is the highway. Yeah.
I totally agree, because it's like that is just the ego. And I feel like, a lot of us, I feel like, because we have these beliefs about our own healing modalities, and it's like we obviously learned and practiced and studied a specific tool, and that sometimes can close us off to other tools. but like, what works for me may not work for you. And I think that's why I would, want to get practitioners like yourself that are really helping people on an emotional, physical, spiritual level heal themselves. And really, what is healing? It's just really undoing those layers that over time have caused a separation, have caused a suffering. And and your healing journey is different to my healing journey, and we all have different backgrounds. And what I love about body work and Ayurveda and breath and yoga and there's so many different things out there. So I just say to whoever I'm working with, it's like, find the magic. And like we were talking about before, the magic really is in connection and finding someone like a therapist or someone that you really connect with. Do you find that a lot?
Yeah, you out in the world, you have the archetype of the healer, and you have the people that are doing this amazing informed work. And remember how I said that trauma, and you said it just now, trauma and healing exists on a spectrum. It is so nuanced that we just need exactly we're out there finding the pieces that work for us. But I would say, and you also just said this too, is the most important part is the therapeutic relationship, and finding a practitioner that is as invested in communicating with you more than anything else. And so that's going to be the base layer of safety. That's going to be the base layer of understanding yourself. And that's where the modality can take hold and do its work.
Yeah, I love that. It's really, I think especially us, I've tried so many different things. Like I'm constantly trying new things because I want to stay open to all these beautiful teachings that so many of us have to offer, and really just dive deep into all these practices because they're so powerful. And a lot of the time I think so many of us are fearful of trying new things because we're so one way point of focus sometimes. Like I know so many people that can't have a massage because they just cannot relax. They're like, no, I don't like people touching me, which is fine. I know some people have that kind of resistance to it, but I think a lot of people, I know for me, for example, I found it so hard to relax just having a massage. It took me so long to just eventually drop in. And then as soon as you drop in, it's like you're in a dream state. And I sometimes wake up dribbling because I've literally felt the shift from my sympathetic drop down to parasympathetic, and it's like literally like a bliss state. Do you notice that a lot when you're working on someone and they drop from those states?
Yeah. Well, it takes as a body worker, it takes a very trained eye and a very trained protocol to get somebody to that state on a consistent level. And so nobody said that bodywork, one, has to be painful and deep, and two, nobody said that that bodywork has to either, like, I don't know, it can, basically nobody said that bodywork has to be like this deep aggressive treatment or this touch that is not acceptable. It's all another form of communication, and it's whatever that person's body is saying at any given time. And can we use tools like the breath as well to drop the body down into a relaxation state? That, by the way, is known as theta. You also experience that in modalities such as hypnotherapy. But the goal is to get people to deep states of relaxation, because that's where the nervous system resets. That in your sleep, deep states of rest, that's where your like whole system does this reset, and that's what we want to get to eventually. So
yeah, it's powerful. That's why I say to my clients too, like, try and go to bed before 10 p.m. because it's going to be, your liver and your immune system and everything is kind of resetting and realigning. And so many, I know my mom, for example, and my sisters, they have these really bad habits of going to bed really late. And I know it's like long term, it's just not so bad for your body and your nervous system. And trying to tell someone that's in that bad habit, in that bad cycle, it's quite hard. But if you can do, like, for example, I know that we use a lot of yoga nidra, which is a deep state of meditation, of conscious sleep. So you're kind of laying down and you're going through different parts of the body, and you just go into this very tranquil, peaceful state. And there's a teacher called Rod Stryker, and he has an app called the Sanctuary app. Have you listened to his yoga nidras on the Sanctuary?
He's got the best voice on this planet.
Yeah. It's like God. It's like, like David Attenborough. Like he gets me into like the deepest states. Like I can go into a yoga nidra and I'm like, oh my God, I feel like a new person when I come out of it, because it's just so resetting for my nervous system. I really recommend that as a healing modality for dropping into that parasympathetic nervous system, especially if you find, for example, like meditation hard. Some people, find it harder to drop into that straight away, but yoga nidra is quite an easy one too, because you're laying down.
Eases you into it. Yeah.
Is there any?
Yeah, it's like it's the informed sleep, right? Mm-hmm. One of my favorite neuroscientists, Dr. Huberman from Stanford, recently became a huge proponent for yoga nidra, because he said that, hey, if you want to change behavior, if you want to change the way the brain works, you need two things. You need focus, extreme focus, and you need deep rest. And those two are what you get with yoga nidra, or even meditation, but nidra being like the easier access point. You get to do both of those at the same time, and so you can change your perceptions, change your outlooks, change your behaviors, all by engaging in like those two at the same time. And nidra is so huge for that. Yeah,
I really recommend checking out the Sanctuary app, Rod Stryker. It's a good one. It's a really accessible one. It's got like heal, peace, empower, spirit. So you can connect with any of those different energies, and then you can tune in to what vibration you want to be calibrated on that day. So if you need a bit of empowerment or healing or connection to your spirit, choose which one that resonates.
I'm big on like he has anywhere from like 9 minutes to 45 minutes. So whatever time somebody's working with in a day, there's always access to his voice and his methods and his nidras. So like they're very accessible, and I think accessibility is huge. Like that's what we're doing right now. We're making things accessible. So
yeah, exactly. I'm going to ask you, Eddie, this is like the question on the Dharma Journey podcast.
Cool.
How do you jump back to a state of love, joy, gratitude, and inspiration at any given moment?
Oh,
it can take a couple of seconds. Connection.
I'll say connection. Yeah, connection to family, partner, friends, keeping those as active as possible. And then also I'll actually add disconnection, but honest disconnection. So being absolutely honest when you need to take a moment and disconnect, but do it mindfully. Don't just sometimes I play a video game, which would be not so mindful. But be honest when you need to disconnect. But so connection, being connected is probably my most important value, and then honest disconnection. Yeah.
Beautiful. I haven't heard that one. Yeah, I did. Well, it's personal preference, isn't it? Like everyone has certain things that really helps them get out of their mind and really jump back to that state. Because sometimes we can stay in that experience for a bit too long, and it's something that's maybe a little bit negative or affected us. It's like, how can we use these healing modalities to get back up and jump back on that path of love, joy, gratitude, and stay connected to ourselves, to others, and just become our best versions. And that's why we're really here, isn't it? It's like, how can we show up and just every day be a better version?
Yeah. Well, there's constant reminders out there that this world is greater than ourselves, and we just need to, we need those reminders. Otherwise, we're these ruminating minds, and so connection's a big part of that for me.
Especially like nowadays when we feel like we're so connected to everyone because it's so accessible to connect with someone on the phone and online, but I feel like there's a big disconnection because it
Right.
doesn't feel as authentic anymore.
Authentic, it needs to be authentic.
It needs to be authentic, for sure. I'm so grateful to have you on the Dharma journey, and I know we're gonna do a couple more down the line, learning more about all of these healing modalities. And how can people reach and connect to you if they want to learn more about all of this incredible lectures? You have like online courses coming up, you have workshops. Can you explain if you have a next one coming up that people can tune in? Or
sure. So I mean, my whole goal is going to be working people bottom up, so from the body to the emotion to the mindfulness to the spirit to connection with something higher and beyond, which is Ishvara or whatever you call it, or want to call it. So I'm working on that process right now, but everyone can find me at scienceoftouch.com. That's where I lecture on neurotrauma. That's where I lecture on bodywork in general, and at Science of Touch on Instagram. That's where I'm telling my story. So so be on the lookout for my stuff, and I appreciate you having me on here.
And before you go, is there any book that you really recommend to the listeners to read if they want to learn more about trauma and understanding like polyvagal theory and the nervous system and the mind-body?
Polyvagal theory is very heavy. So if you want a book that breaks it down a little bit, or adds different theories to the body process, Nurturing Resilience is a great book. It's an important book that an author named Kathy Kane and I forget the gentleman's name, they both put it out there. So that's how do we heal from somatic approaches, like using the mind-body connection. And there's this epic book, if anyone's neuroscience based out there, called Descartes' Error. So it's how do our emotions tie to our bodies, and that book breaks it down from a neuroscientist's perspective. It's kind of deep, but I think that's one of the most important books out there. So Descartes' Error. So it's Descartes said, "I think, therefore I am," but really it's "I feel, therefore I am." So that's the error that he made, and that's what the book gets across there. So.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Edward. I'll put all of your information on the bio, and obviously on Instagram on the Dharma Journey, and my personal Instagram at Briar Roots. So much joy for having you on. Thank you so much. I look forward
thank you, Briar.
Connecting with you soon. Bye, Eddie.
Bye.
In 2 seconds, I meet you.
In 2 seconds, yeah.
Bye.
Om Gam Ganapataye Namah. Om Gam Ganapataye Namah. Om Gam Ganapataye Namah.
Thank you so much for joining me, your host, Briar Roots, on the Dharma Journey podcast. It's been an honor to guide you and to have you listen to me and amazing people on this podcast from all walks of life. If you enjoyed the podcast, if something shifted within you and hopefully it made you laugh, cry, or had a moment of inspiration, then please feel free to share this podcast with others if it resonates. And really, that's how we grow. We grow as a collective. We grow when we unite and we help one another out. And really, that's the beauty of why we're all here, is to guide each other home, help us uncover our unique soul's jiva, our purpose, so we can shine our light with others and live a more auspicious life. So thank you for joining me on the Dharma Journey, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Aho, Hariom.